With 6 races left in the 2024 season, there is still plenty to fight for both on and off the track. I am going to go through some of the major battles and talking points that are still undecided and give my thoughts on who I think will come out on top. And don't forget to let me know your predictions and some of the battles that you're going to be keeping a very close eye on in the comments below. The fight in the midfield this season has actually been quite static and boring in a way, because behind the established top 4 teams, Aston Martin has been in a no man's land all by themselves in 5th, and then behind them is where there's actually been some competition. RB started the season as easily the strongest out of those back of the grid teams, going on a run of 10 points finishes in 12 races. But as they've started to lose their way with their upgrades, the likes of Williams and Haas have really started to get into the picture. Both Haas and Williams have scored points 3 times in the last 3 races, and since Williams have made the switch from Sargent to Colapinto, they finally have 2 drivers who are capable of scoring points. Granted, Williams is definitely the outlier in this fight because even if RB don't score a single point for the rest of the season, Williams would still have to more than double their current points tally in the last 6 races just to overtake them in the fight for 6th. It's therefore a straight fight between Haas and RB with just 3 points separating them. RB hasn't scored a single point in 4 races, but with the arrival of Liam Lawson, he is going to be highly motivated to score some points because not only is it important for the team, but he has also got a Red Bull seat on the line if he manages to impress in the remaining races. The momentum is definitely with Haas, however. Nico Hülkenberg in particular is having an outstanding season, and given that RB haven't really been consistent across a range of different tracks, I do think that the combination of Hülkenberg and Magnussen will get the job done to overtake RB for 6th in the Constructors. Whilst most of the focus is on the fight at the front, behind Max and Lando, there is actually 2 fights going on for best of the rest. In the drivers, Leclerc and Piastri are separated by just 8 points, and in the Constructors, the gap between Red Bull in 2nd and Ferrari in 3rd is 34 points. I think Leclerc is quietly having arguably the best season in his career. I don't want to diminish Sainz's contributions, but if it wasn't for Leclerc, Ferrari wouldn't even be in the conversation to potentially beat Red Bull for 2nd. This battle could actually have some really big consequences, because if Max goes on to win the title, but Red Bull get beaten by Ferrari and drop to 3rd, the amount of pressure and the narrative around Checo is going to get exponentially worse. In terms of the drivers, given how competitive that McLaren looks, and also with Oscar Piastri looking more and more comfortable challenging at the front for wins on a more consistent basis, I just don't see how Charles will be able to hold him off. The Ferrari this season has been nowhere near as good as the McLaren. Its performance is more similar to that of Mercedes in terms of how it's fluctuated throughout the season, and the fact that Leclerc is still 3rd at this point of the season, I think that just underlines how well he's performed, but I do think that this is one fight in the championship that he will lose to Oscar Piastri. As for the Constructors' battle, 34 points is not an insignificant deficit, and it's going to be very hard for Ferrari to overcome it, especially as it does seem that Max and Red Bull have got to a better level of competitiveness and have got more on top of the car's balance issues. The Checo factor is still the difficult one to predict because even though there was a lot of positivity about how much closer he was getting to Max around Monza and Baku time, the fact of the matter is that due to his crash with Sainz, he didn't convert that pace into points in Baku, and then whilst Max was finishing 2nd, he was back to massively underperforming again in Singapore. Both Ferrari and Red Bull are bringing upgrades in Austin, which will give us a great template of how competitive these teams are going to be for the remainder of the season. I suspect that with how motivated Max is going to be by his own title fight, his performances alone I think will be enough to just keep Red Bull's nose ahead in the fight per 2nd, but given that Ferrari are closing the gap, with Leclerc and Sainz consistently finishing ahead of Checo, I could see the final gap between them being down to single digits after Abu Dhabi. And next up, let's talk about the biggest off-track battle that's yet to be decided, and that's the fight for the final seat on the grid in 2025 at Sauber. The reason why there's been so much uncertainty around this seat is because at the start of the season, when Andreas Seidel was still in charge, there was some tension between Valtteri and the Sauber/Audi management. Understandably, there was a lot of frustration from Valtteri's side about the underperformance of the car and of the team, and whilst it looked like it created a rift, given that they also started to look for potential replacements, with Binotto now in charge, I think that Valtteri has really tried to bite his tongue about his frustrations, because fundamentally, he's got no other options, and Sauber knows that they have all the power. Having said that, other options have also been heavily rumoured, with the main drivers in contention being Bottas, Franco Colapinto, Mick Schumacher, Théo Pourchaire, and Gabriel Bortoleto. Given the situation that Sauber finds itself in, I think they'll want to partner Hülkenberg with another driver with Formula 1 experience, and so I don't think they'll go for either their own junior Pourchaire or McLaren's junior Bortoleto, despite the fact that Gabby looks to be a seriously hot prospect for the future. Mick Schumacher has recently emerged as a late candidate for the seat, but personally, I don't really see what he can offer you that Bottas and Colapinto can't. For me, it's a coin flip between Colapinto and Bottas because Franco, who has been the surprise of the season, knows that there's no future for him at Williams, given that Albon and Sainz are on long-term contracts, and as far as Valtteri, his main asset is that with Hülkenberg coming in, having someone who has been there at the team and can be a benchmark can be really useful to helping them improve. Like I said, for me it is a total coin flip in terms of who is going to get the seats because both of the drivers are deserving and I'll definitely feel sorry for whoever misses out. But with just how bad this team is right now and with all of the pressure of Audi on the horizon, I think that they're going to play it safe and eventually re-sign Valtteri to keep some continuity alongside Hülkenberg. And so the last battle that is yet to be decided is the big one, the fight for the World Championship. Now, even though I have talked a lot about Lando this year, I have been really cautious about actually calling this a title fight because to me, Lando has never really been close enough to give me any feeling of uncertainty about who is going to win. Since Miami, which feels like 3 years ago now, the gap in points between Max and Lando has decreased by 1 point. It was 53 after Miami, and it's now 52 after Singapore, and that is the problem. It will come as no surprise that Max is still my overwhelming favourite to win the title, but what I will do is try and play devil's advocate a little bit in terms of how I think Lando can at least push Max all the way. Even though the gap since Miami has only decreased by a single point, and despite all of the fair criticism that I have had against Lando, over the past few races, he has finally started to put it all together. He has outscored Max 4 races in a row, and despite the fact that Monza wasn't a great race with Oscar jumping him at the start, he dominated in Zandvoort and Singapore, and then in Baku. Despite an unlucky yellow flag in qualifying, I think he maximised his potential finishing in 4th after the Perez and Sainz crash, with a brilliant comeback drive to still outscore Max. The momentum now is definitely with Lando. He's got the confidence after picking up a couple of wins. We know that he'll potentially have a little bit of help from Oscar and the team if the opportunity arises, and if he just keeps outscoring Max and closing the gap, the pressure on Max is only going to get bigger and bigger, and as we have seen in 2021 and even at times throughout this season, Max is not immune to making mistakes or losing his head when he is put under pressure. After the triple header is when we'll definitively find out if we actually have a title fight on our hands, because if the gap is not below 30 points, then I just don't see it happening. If Lando can just drag it out so that mathematically the earliest that Max can win the title is the second to last race in Qatar, then I think Max will really start to feel the pressure to get it wrapped up early, because there is no way that he wants to risk going into a title decider with all of the unknowns that can bring. Anyway, those are just my thoughts on the big battles that are still left to fight for in 2024, but let me know your predictions for each of them in the comments below, and if you did enjoy this video and want to support the channel, then don't forget to subscribe, that would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.